Oldsmobile next to the Guildford Shopping Center in sunny Surrey.
Now, from Jordan's, a carpet price that defies comparison. Save on a gorgeous sculptured multicolored carpet by Evans & Black. Jordan's priced at just $17.95 a square yard. You'll save $9 a square yard. Get the savings that defy comparison now from Jordan's. Beautiful sculptured carpeting by Evans & Black. Now at this incredibly low price, just $17.95 a square yard. You save $9 a square yard. Hurry for this spectacular price breakthrough from Jordan's.
BCTV, we're giving it all we got.
Yes, it is so too, 9 a.m. precisely. And there are a couple of things I want to get off my chest this morning before I get down to business. We're all sick and tired of the prostitution and the hookers business and the evasion and waffling and gutlessness of politicians at all levels, with the sole exception of one magnificent spokesman for the NDP, whom I shall not identify at this particular time. But the interesting development is that there's been a major reshuffle of some kind in the Vancouver City Police Force to attack major crime, murderers and rapists, instead of going after bookies, gamblers, and I think hookers. You know, any time when the people of the province of BC generally look at piece of stupidities, Vancouver Police not necessarily involved deeply in this, when they scrub a wheel of chance for the Variety Club because they don't have the right permits, and then tell us that they're going to concentrate in major crime, we hope it's a real change of pace. What this concentration on major crime means is that the concept of so-called team policing has finally collapsed in the city of Vancouver. For years we were told that team policing was the way to go. And very simply put, team policing meant that policemen in any area covered that area on a team basis. The net effect of it was that inexperienced younger policemen were the first to tackle major crime. By the time it got to detectives and skilled ones, many a time the game was already over. So team policing has collapsed. But I sometimes wonder about how policing is done throughout the lower mainland of British Columbia. I wonder what the devil goes on in CLEU, C-L-E-U, the Coordinated Law Enforcement Unit. And they've got another tactical force of some kind too. Because Harcourt made one of the silliest remarks I have ever seen in black and white recently, in which he said, with his obvious lack of knowledge of what's going on in the city in this area, that the recent $1 million undercover police operation in Vancouver was successful in identifying Vancouver's 150 pimps. We know every pimp in the city now, but we can't get the prostitutes to testify against them, he said. If it were true that $1 million was spent to identify 150 pimps in the city, let me tell you how much it should have cost. Should have cost a couple of bottles of beer, $25 in taxi fares, and even I, a few years ago when I was around town, could have pointed out 15 or 20 pimps in an evening's stroll in certain quarters in Vancouver. Harcourt has backed off now, of course, and he's now changed his tune a little bit, and he says that the identification of the pimps was, you know, came about 3 or 4 years ago following a related undercover operation. But the very thought that anyone would say we spent $1 million to identify 150 pimps is just damn stupid, if I may say so, with a little bit of emphasis this morning. Trouble is that we don't keep a close enough eye on law enforcement from the highest level down. One other piece of crass, what do you call it, thoughtlessness by the provincial government. 2 things happened. I think it was Wednesday. They announced the bids for the Anasis Island Bridge. They were expected to run between $50 and $65 million, and the lowest bid would not necessarily be accepted. The decision would be made by the cabinet. The very same day, we learned that a chintzy, tiny, small grant of $50,000 for the talking library at UBC, the Crane Library, had been cut out because of restraint. That is the classic example of the short-sighted application of common sense priorities. $50,000. The volunteers record the books. You need to have staff to put the recordings on tape and make them available to the blind for their courses at UBC. Apart from the $50 taken away from the poor handicapped people, this cutting of the $50,000 for blind students at UBC is abysmally cheap. I trust I make myself clear. Now, talking about cheap, just a minute, you can start the count now. Talking about cheap, there's a guy called Bob McAndrew in Vancouver who has a problem with BC Transit. I hate expropriation stories, but this is a fascinating one. Owns a piece of property in common with his common-law wife. She gets double that they've offered him for half the property.
So she gets $230,000 for her half. I get $112 for my half. Both prices are very ridiculous.
We're going to attempt to explain what may be machinations of BC Transit or what may be a proper solution as they go through the route, and we're talking here about the 29th Street station in Vancouver. And we've got Bob McAndrew to tell his story. We're going to attempt to explain the BC Transit position. What else have we got this morning? Middle East. In the studio is Abdullah Abdullah, who is the spokesman for the Palestine Information Office, which roughly translated means he is a spokesman for the dreaded, feared, hated, admired, loved, and respected Palestine Liberation Organization. And first to Abdullah after the break. It's not a proper comparison, I don't suppose, but in the UK they have the insoluble problem of Belfast with terrorism and bombings and burnings and killings. And in the Middle East, on both sides of the fence, they've got terrorism and bombings and burnings and killings. And it doesn't seem like there's any solution in the foreseeable future. There's been the odd time when you thought that between the Egyptians and the Israelis, there was a prospect, and still is a prospect, for some reasonable amity and intercourse. But I have here this morning the spokesman in Canada for the Palestine Information Office, which roughly translated means the Palestine Liberation Organization. Is that correct, Mr. Abdullah?
Very correct.
All right, Mr. Abdullah. What's your line of propaganda this morning? What do you want to tell me? Or shall I start with questions?
Yeah, I'm telling you that there is a great danger in the Middle East emanating from the fact that there are new circumstances created by the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in the year of 1982, of the continued Israeli expropriation of Palestinian land and the denial of the Palestinians' right to their homeland, and the new alliance signed between strategic alliance between the United States and Israel. This is not only endangering the regional elements in the region, but also endangering the whole world peace because of a possible confrontation between East and West.
Okay, that's your pat statement. Now let me ask you some questions. I met Yasser Arafat in Amman, Jordan, I think it was 1968 or 69. Mm-hmm. Is Yasser Arafat now discredited, defeated, and hiding in Morocco?
No, in Morocco.
Well, he was chased out of Beirut.
Of Beirut, yes, and
who chased them out? It wasn't the Israelis.
In Beirut, the Israelis, and Tripoli, the Syrians. But it doesn't make much difference, really. The Palestinians, in their march to free their country, to free their people, and have a homeland for their people, Well, they have to have a very long and difficult times in trying to achieve
No,
this.
I agree.
In Morocco, Chairman Arafat was not hiding. He was attending the Islamic Summit Conference with 45 member states, where he was elected permanent vice president of that international organization.
Oh, very nice. But the fact was that Arafat has now twice had to flee, has he not?
No, he was not fleeing. He was there, but he was forced to leave.
He didn't want to leave the Middle East,
No.
did he? He didn't want to go.
He wouldn't
Who
leave.
threw him out? It wasn't the Americans, was it? It was the Syrians.
Well, you can't look at the forefront and see the causes and the
Oh, no.
reasons.
I know there are endemic...
There is a design that the Israelis have to rid the Palestinians of their leadership, have to rid the Palestinians of their aspirations and hopes. They are helped by the Americans.
All I want from you
the
is...
armies...
Yes. I understand all the machinations and all the power plays, and I can see why the Arab countries are worried about, for instance, the Americans going to supply continuous arms to Israel and going to stockpile arms in Israel, I believe the position is.
Yes.
That, of course, is of great concern. First of all, give me a clinical report. We have, first of all, in Syria, Assad.
Yes.
Assad is a kind of socialist, not
Yes.
very heavy socialist, right? He is allied to some extent with the Soviet Union.
Well, he is heavily in connection with the Americans as well.
All right. Do your people approve of Assad and his actions? The Syrian guy who embarrassed Reagan by giving to Jesse Jackson the single American flyer prisoner. Was that a good move by Assad or a bad move?
Well, we don't judge Assad from one single incident. We judge Assad in his position against the Palestinian question and the Palestinian organization.
So Assad is a baddie. He's
to
an
us,
evil man.
He is allied with the Americans in trying to liquidate the Palestinian
He's allied
movement.
with the Soviet Union.
Well, he is armed by the Soviet Union, but he is allied with the Americans.
In other words,
you know,
he
the
has
contacts between Assad and the Americans is more heavily with the Americans than it is with the Soviets.
Yeah, but let's not use the word allied. He is allied with the Soviet Union, but he has the same objective in relation to the PLO
With the
as the
Americans.
United States. Is that correct?
Is that what he's projected? Yeah.
All right. Now, so the PLO has had a split down the middle.
No.
Some have gone to the Syrian side.
No, it's not that. The PLO is not split. There's an attempt by the Syrians to exploit some internal differences which is there between any group, organization, or government, or party, political party.
But a number of the PLO have defected to the Syrian because of their internal difficulties.
There are dissidents who are supported, armed, and helped by the Syrians. But this will not affect the unity, the effectiveness of the PLO. The PLO was not decreased in influence or in ability to continue the march to the realization
Okay, I'll
of
accept
Palestinian
that.
rights.
Now, the Israelis are definitely allied with the Christians, phalangists in Syria, in Lebanon, right?
In Lebanon, yes.
So we have the Israelis, and they use the Christian phalangists, don't they? Who are the holy war people who did that foul massacre of the 250-odd American soldiers in their barracks? Who was that?
Well, you have to realize how the situation is characterized in that region. Israel intervened in 1975-76 heavily to create a division in Lebanon according to religious lines.
And to protect their borders with friendly people across the border. That was their objective.
Well, their objective not to protect their borders were not threatened. There are the Israeli press, there are the United Nations reports saying that Israeli borders were quiet for over 12 months preceding the Israeli invasion. But Israel wanted to create small groups, small religious entities in the region to have
This is the old British technique.
of controlling the old British
Divide and rule. Divide and rule.
techniques.
Back your
Now,
friends whom you can use and divide. We're very happy about the divisions in the PLO. But what I asked you, Abdullah,
now these people
was who blew up the barracks? Was that a Syrian group or an Iranian group who are engaged in a jihad, a holy war?
Oh, I think the Americans have more intelligence resources than I have,
You
and
do.
they did not.
What if
I didn't know. I read the press as the Americans.
the Americans
fury.
didn't blow it up?
No, but the Americans should know.
But the
And
Israelis
they
didn't
never
blow
said.
it up.
They never said who did it.
Jihad. It was a holy war organization
This
from Iran, somebody said.
Well, no one really can identify this group.
It wasn't the PLO.
But, no, it was not the PLO. But this was, in the minds of the people there, some group that is opposing the American heavily intervention on the part of the Israelis and the Phalangists in Lebanon.
Good. Wasn't a good thing, was it?
Well, wasn't good at all. And the American presence and American involvement there wasn't good either.
Brought it out. Yeah, fair enough. I don't like to see the New Jersey throwing shells from 20 miles into villages in the Lebanon.
No, that's not the role of the Americans in the first place.
Yeah, take it away. After the break. Abdullah Abdullah, PLO spokesman, insists that Yasser Arafat is still in command of a unified PLO.
Of course, because he is elected by the legislative body of the PLO, the Palestine National Council.
But he's now in Morocco.
Well, he was attending a conference. He'll be going back to his headquarters, temporary headquarters in Tunis, and moving around to try to...
Would it be the same people who
support
blew
for his
up the
people.
American barracks who killed Kirk, the president of the American University in Beirut?
I really don't know. Well, but the American intelligence are very much heavily present in the region. They should know.
What's the situation within Israel now? What's the situation? Didn't the Israelis recently disenfranchise a bunch of mayors?
Yes, 9 mayors were dismissed and 9 municipal councils were dismissed. 3 attempts on the lives of 3 mayors were launched back 3 years ago or more than that. One of them lost both legs, the other lost 1 leg, and still up to this moment, the Israelis did not find the culprits in this
No, nor
attack.
did they find the guy who threw the bomb into the bus in downtown Jerusalem the other day.
But look, you have to differentiate between state terrorism, you have to differentiate between shooting the school children in the streets, demolishing houses, confiscating land, and at the same time, you have to expect this unfortunate reaction by one way or another.
Yeah, but don't tell me
I
to
think the
differentiate.
circle of violence has to be brought to an end.
Should the
How
US
to bring this back to an end?
All right, what's your first proposition?
Yes.
To bring peace back, should the U.S. get away from the Lebanon altogether?
Well, that's part of the problem, but it is not the essence of the problem. The essence of the problem that there is a people called the Palestinian people. They have been chased out of their homeland for the past 36 years. They've been denied the fundamental basic rights. They have been denied statehood. They have been denied any identity. These people have to live as normal people and be returned to their homeland. That is the basic proposition for finding a solution where Palestinians, Israelis, can live in harmony and in fraternity.
You're a dreamer.
You've been there.
You're
You've
a
been there.
dreamer. Palestinians and Israelis can live in harmony for eternity. Okay.
Certainly, because they lived that. You've been in that part
Sure,
of the world
many
before.
years, many years.
Of course, before Israel was created, before the Palestinians were destroyed and evicted, condemned to live as refugee camps in their own country.
Simple question. Is there harmony between Israel and the PLO in this question? Very simple question, yes or no. Does the Palestine Liberation Organization now, or will it in the near future, recognize the existence as a state of Israel? Now, yes or no?
When there is a Palestinian state, that question will be addressed to it.
Next
the
question.
Palestinians will not ask a question when they are denied everything.
Now, what you say, and this is your dream, and I'm not blaming you for the dream, but we must keep it simple for people like me.
Well,
You
if it
say
is-
that if there becomes a Palestinian state in which the Arab population, the
Yes.
Palestinians and the Israel will sit side by side in harmony, providing you're in command.
In our part of that word, of course.
But
We
you
have-
want the old Palestine back for you.
No, we are saying that the Palestinians have to establish an independent state in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, which has been occupied in 1967.
Okay, good. If you got the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, would you recognize Israel as a state?
We have to sit together, and we have to negotiate and find the terms, how we will establish our relations between ourselves. If we find it positive for both sides to recognize each other, that's the proposition to be set to the
But
new...
you are saying you are prepared to recognize Israel with its own territory, we want to define the territory and its own boundaries as an independent state.
If we have an independent Palestinian state,
If you have an independent Palestinian state on
And
the
if
West
it-
Bank and in the Gaza Strip or
if
whatever.
there is a defined territories for Israel, I think that Palestinian state will consider recognizing Israel.
Do you think that's possible even in you're a young man, in your lifetime?
I hope so. Why not?
Because you want
You know-
too much.
No, too much wanting 20% of our own country, is it too much?
No, I'm not saying that I'm advocating that. I'm merely saying that the Israelis will never, ever give up a piece of land which they say is necessary for the defense of their homeland. Their homeland.
How about the defense of the Palestinians? Aren't they human? Aren't they the indigenous people of Palestine?
But I'm talking about the
There
facts.
is no security, there is no safety for Israel or the Israelis as long as the Palestinians are denied their right to homeland.
Yeah, I think that the lack of decent treatment for the refugees in all these years between is the festering sore which has caused much of today's problem.
Exactly.
And many people, including the whole wide world, are to blame for that treatment.
Well,
But
we
you and I-
appreciate this recognition.
But you and I can't go back through the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the Balfour Declaration, the British retreat from the Middle East, 48 war,
48.
and all the other wars between.
Yeah, but although the Israelis are trying to go back, as they claimed 2,000 years ago and more, we're saying, well, why don't we go back to 1967 when Israel occupied the West Bank and Gaza Strip? It's a very short perion of time. I remember
Okay,
it very
Abdullah,
well.
Abdullah, do you raise money for the PLO here like the
That's
the
not-
IRA does in the United States?
That's not my job. My job is to inform people on the
Does
developments
anybody
of the
else raise
Palestine.
money for the PLO here?
But of course, there are people who are donating money
Well, I mean-
to the Palestine Red Crescent, to the social welfare programs, to educational programs. So
Good.
we would welcome this.
Okay, Abdullah, we're going to take one segment of telephone calls to Abdullah Abdullah. Keep your questions short, sharp, you know, get to the point. It's Friday morning, I want to go on to some other lighter stuff and whatnot. After this break. Well, Abdullah, you'll meet some friends and you'll meet some enemies, but you've got a skin like an elephant, haven't you? A hide like an elephant. You must have by now. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Abdullah.
That's
Yes.
you, Abdullah.
Oh, yeah. Abdullah,
Yes, sir.
at one time, and not so long ago, I was very, very sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. However, I've been paying attention to what's been going on, and from the news that I've been getting now, I think that they're absolutely ridiculous amount of people. I would like to ask you where King Hussein comes in. I know all about Israel. I know that the PLO have been condemning Israel, and the Syrians have been condemning Israel, and the Arab nations have been condemning Israel. But what about this King Hussein? I mean, don't the Palestinians recognize him, or they're just this Yasser Arafat?
Good question.
Believe it or not, excuse me for 1 minute. Up until the time that only Israel had a confrontation with Yasser Arafat, I really believed in the Palestinian cause. But when I see that the Arabs murdering each other, I mean murdering each other, now I just wonder whether they're at all civilized. Truthfully, in the meantime, what I would like to know is where King Hussein comes in with you people.
King Hussein is the king of Jordan. And Jordan is not Palestine. Palestine, where the Palestinians are citizens, where the Palestinians are the indigenous people, wanted to have a country of their own. There is some dialogue between the Palestinians and King Hussein in order to coordinate their efforts to regain the occupied territories of the
I
West
know,
Bank
but
and
let
Gaza
me
Strip.
put it clearly. Hussein was the guy who expelled the PLO with blood and force at one time.
Exactly.
Recently, Yasser Arafat went and met with Hussein, and I saw them talking together on the television.
Yes, sure.
Is Hussein now an ally of the PLO?
Well, it's not a matter of ally or enemy, but Hussein, when he did his deed back in 1970, it was on orders from United States that Rogers' plan was presented at the time, and they wanted to give Hussein some control of the West Bank. So Hussein believed the Americans, and he did what he did against the PLO to eliminate the PLO from the political scene.
Hussein's territory-
What happened, that Hussein came to realize that the Americans were bluffing him. that they did not give him anything, they did not support him in getting any part of the West Bank. So he came to his senses and thought that the best way is to coordinate with the PLO, which is the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, in order to regain what they might both regain together from the West Bank.
The score, as I see it, is that Hussein was an enemy of the Palestinians. Hussein now has got some relationships with Arafat. That's putting it simply, because of his...
Well, you cannot also take a pill like that. You have to understand what are the ingredients of this pill.
Go ahead, please. Come on, that's you, the Cockney accent.
Oh, is that me? Right. Well, I reckon it's disgusting that we can have murderers like these PLO on the television. You know, there's enough created in this world, and you have to fetch it home. Leave it out there. Let them kill everyone that kill themselves. Because all they are, they're murderers. If you take it, what they done in London years ago, when they was blowing up places, the PLO, they was hijacking everybody, they were all a terrorist group. Now they've got bigger and they've got a lot more money.
You see, what this man is telling me, now listen there, old Cockney friend, he's telling me that I'm doing something which has been heavily criticized in Britain, where the BBC will put on these damned IRA killers in shadow. But they were real killers on the BBC. You can't say that Abdullah is a killer. I don't think you've murdered anybody recently. Abdullah, have you?
He's a part of the organisation. He's coming over and making out they're trying to look like saints.
Well, look, you have to realize that the Palestinians, myself is one of them, is trying to open the eyes of people like yourself who don't know much about the plight of the Palestinians. How many people were murdered of the Palestinians, be it in Sabra and Shatila refugee camp?
How about the Jews? They were murdered. Look at how many millions of them was murdered.
Well, look, sir, the Jews were murdered by...
Now, and I agree with the Jews. There's nobody in this world that's not going to take no more bullshit from anybody, excuse the language, but take no more bullshit from anybody in this world, and the Jews are good. I say good luck to them.
Okay, boy.
Well, look,
you see what? No, that'll go on forever. What he's saying to me, it's a criticism of me for putting you on.
Yes, yes.
You see, in Britain, in Ireland, and in England, an organisation called the Sinn Féin, which means ourselves alone, is the political arm of the IRA. And it's the Sinn Féin spokesman who can come up front. But, and he was wrong to compare you with the IRA killers or even the PLO murderer, but you are the spokesman for these people. Nick, how much to go? Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack. I'd like to draw an analogy between the Canadian situation and the situation in the Middle East today. Suppose that you were a native Indian in Canada, and because you were a native Indian, you were not allowed, you or your children, to have family allowances. Now, this is the way the situation is in Israel, that if you're not an immigrant, don't belong to the right religion, you don't have the same rights. So how can we ever hope for peace in the Middle East when there are differentiations made on the basis of race and religion? And what would happen if someone tried that in Canada?
Yeah, well, considerable civilized trouble, but I don't think they'll be killing.
I appreciate your analogy, but I believe also that there is a responsibility on the conscience of the people in the West who are taking part, whether consciously or unconsciously, by supporting these racists, by allowing them to use their own money in persecution of the Palestinians there.
Who are the racists?
The racists, the Israelis, who are not only discriminating against the Palestinians because of their origin, but also confiscating the land of the Palestinian, denied them the right to be as human beings, and denying them the right to have a state of their own.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I was wondering what Mr. Abdullah thinks of the American involvement in Lebanon and also in El Salvador and the other parts of the world where America's involved right now.
Well, I believe this is a new phase of modern imperialism, trying to dominate areas in the region, but their involvement in the Middle East is more obvious. It's the American New Jersey that is shelling the villages and townships in the mountains of Lebanon. It is not only the American arms, but also the American technology and expertise that is helping the Israelis in sending their cluster bombs, phosphorus bombs, to be used against Palestinians maimed and killed.
I'll accept the imperialism of the United States, which is a bit repulsive and repugnant on occasions, in the same way as I recognize the imperialism of the Soviet Union in Afghanistan or in any of its spheres of influence, right?
We never condone the occupation of any foreign country by a foreign power.
Right. You agree with me. The Soviet Union, if anything, is as bad, if not worse, than the Americans.
But I believe we have to make also a differentiation here. The difference is that the Soviet Union were invited by a recognized government in Kabul.
Oh, come
Be it
on.
rightly or wrongly, this is an internal politics.
You set up a puppet government, and then you get the puppet government to invite you in, and you say, I come to support the puppet government.
But you have to realize that there is too many puppet governments in the world.
Sure
it's
is
not
that.
only in Afghanistan.
Wish we had a puppet government in Ottawa. It'd be better than the one we have. We can't even find a puppet.
No comment.
No, we just can't find a puppet. We've got some who should be puppets. Go ahead, please.
Hi.
Yeah.
Abdullah, I'm just wondering if you can comment on the fact that the Palestinians are asking for 20% of their land back that's in Israel, which is well irrigated and has been reclaimed from swamp, and they're not concentrating on getting 70 or some odd percent of their land back from Jordan, which is desert. Can you speak on that, please?
Oh, I think you don't know the history or the geography of the country. These territories you're talking about, the 20%, that's the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, were occupied in 1967. There is no development whatsoever by the Israelis since their occupation of these territories. On the contrary, the orchards have dried out because of the Israelis pulling water from that area and taking it to the Israeli side. You must have watched some television programs on ABC, on NBC, on CBC even sometimes, saying how the Israelis are confiscating the water from the Arab land and making no industry being allowed in this territory.
This from the Jordan River? Yeah.
Coming to the other part of your question, that is Jordan is Palestine, well, you have to realize that Jordan is not Palestine. Palestinians before 1948 to cross the river Jordan to the east bank of it, that is at the time the Transjordan Kingdom, they used to have a visa before they're crossing. And if they were residents of that country, they don't need this visa. It's an old Zionist myth that's trying to blind the people in here to the plight of the Palestinians, to the crimes they committed against the Palestinians.
Last call from Kamloops. Kamloops.
Yes, Mr. Webster.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Abdullah if it's not true that in 1949, 1950, the Arab nations surrounding Israel incited the Palestinians remaining in Israel, or the Palestinian population in Israel, to move out of Israel. And the purpose behind the Arab desire to have their own nationals move out of Israel was that they would only have a political football to kick around.
Well, that's a long, complicated story, and we'll go on to it forever. I think we'll...
You don't want me to comment on that?
Yeah, I can if you like.
Oh, I don't think this is a verified myth of the Zionists, because there are an Irish scholar, Erskine Chandler, who researched this myth and found that the Arabs were asking the Palestinians to stay put in their country, and they were not asking the Palestinians to leave. But this is not the real issue. The real issue, the Palestinians are the residents of Palestine, the owners of Palestine. Do they have right to their country or not? Whether they left by cause of fear, by cause of terrorism perpetrated by the Zionist gangs at the time, or by any other means.
In
they
the
still
final
have their claim to land.
analysis, there is a possibility 100 years from now, if we don't destroy ourselves with the H-bombs, potentially of peace in the Middle East, right?
Oh, we hope that peace will come to the Middle East before then.
My thanks to Abdullah Abdullah, spokesman for the Palestine Liberation Organization in Canada. Thanks,
My pleasure.
Abdullah. I'll be back after the break.
Thank you.
When you've been in the business as long as I have, you learn that there are not two sides to any story. There are 10 sides to any story. Take this one here, 29th Street ALRT station. What the man is going to tell you right now, Mr. McAndrew, is clinically dead on. There's no doubt about it. But of course there are complications. Expropriation by BC Transit is one of these mysterious and difficult items which we're going to try explain in two parts. First, McAndrew.
Jack, I'm not sure whether this story belongs on Webster or on Ripley's Believe It or Not. Some of the weirdest bit of bureaucratic nonsense that I can imagine. This is Robert McAndrew right here. And he owns this property up as far as the corner up here and all the way over here to where these equipment are working, building the 29th Street ALRT station. Mr. McAndrew owns this property with his common law wife. BC Transit has offered him only half for the property that they've offered to his wife. Is that basically right?
Basically right, yes.
They're going to give her $230,000.
That's correct.
And they've offered you $112.
Both sums have been received.
I don't understand.
Well,
is the property separated anyway?
No, it's not. It is in no way separated by boundaries. But
It's a unified piece of property.
it is, yes, definitely.
And it's not strata-titled. It's
No
not.
way.
It's
No.
just one piece of property. You're co-owners.
Fee simple, I believe they call it.
How can they offer her twice as much as they're going to give you?
Well, because they got her to sell out for $230,000, and once they get the hammer, once they get the power, they say, no way, you have lost your bargaining power. We are going to give you $112,000.
Okay, let's start at the beginning, see if we can figure this out piece by piece. How long have you owned this property here?
Approximately 30 some odd years.
And when was the first time that you thought that BC Transit was interested?
Approximately 3 years ago, they made noises that there was a station going across the street in their yard, over in their park. And also over here, they never pinpointed the station. So about less than a year ago, they came up and said, well, this is where it's going to go, maybe.
Right next to your property?
Right on my property.
And did they make you an offer at that time?
Yes, they made us an offer of approximately $225,000.
And what did you tell them to that offer? How much did you want?
I said I would go for the going price of property here. It runs to about $25 a square foot, which I have been offered. I have 3 offers in that neighborhood.
And what would that make the property worth at $25 a square foot?
Approximately $1.2 million.
$1.2 million.
Something
and they
similar,
offered
yeah.
you about $250,000.
That's correct, yes.
So then what happened?
Well, I said no. This is no way.
And I don't mean to get too personal, but at that time, were you still living with your common law?
No, I was not.
You were separated.
No,
but she had title. Her name was on
yes,
the title.
She was living here, as a matter of fact.
So then what happened?
Well, I said, I asked her if she would wait for expropriation, and we could go into the expropriation hearing, and
you felt comfortable. You felt comfortable going into expropriation.
Oh yes, definitely, because they cannot cut it down lower than the going price for property adjacent.
And did your wife agree?
My wife agreed, but then sharp real estate operator. And I don't know what kind of a lawyer. I've never seen him, never heard of, don't know him. I got a hold of her with the ALRT representative. I don't believe he was there at the time, but they convinced her that she should sell and leave me holding the bag.
You mean she could sell her interest in the property?
She could sell her half interest in the property. Well, actually, she doesn't own half interest, but she could sell her interest in the property and leave me sitting there.
And how much did they offer her?
They gave her $230,000.
And did she accept it?
She accepted. She signed the papers.
And you still refused?
And I still refused.
Then what happened?
Well, then they sent me a letter saying that now that she had sold, no, just a moment, scratch that. She said, they phoned me, or I was on the phone with them, they said, well, now that she had settled, this has set the price. Now either you accept it or not.
So you had to
I had to either
accept the $230,000
or reject it.
And what did you do?
I rejected it.
And then what happened?
Well, they expropriated it.
And for how much?
$112,000 for the other half interest.
So she gets $230,000
for her half. I get $112 for my half. Both prices are very ridiculous. When you can see the price of property around here at $25, well, the minimum price is $20 a square foot, and $25 is the going price. And a piece of property, when when you've accumulated it into a sizable piece like this, is worth 20% more, I would say, than a single lot.
So now I assume you're going to arbitration.
I am going to arbitration, yes.
Well, Jack, that's his side of the story. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You expect that when couples get separated, it's about 50-50. Here, he's getting half of what his wife's getting. We're going to go to BC Transit and ask them what's going on here.
Well, I was assigned to talk to BC Transit. Now, listen closely and try and comprehend. BC Transit, who've got a special expropriation act of their own, originally appraised that 1 acre with a wee house on it, a bit of a swampy land, for $220,000. Mr. McAndrew then commissioned a real estate agent to assemble neighboring properties into a bit of a block. I forget the acreage. Do you remember, Mark?
Oh, something over 2.5 acres.
All right. And got clear indication very properly that it would qualify for rezoning as a townhouse complex. And that put the value of all the property around there up, not because of transit, because of the townhouse, significantly. BC Transit agreed. Here's the key to it. And they had the property reappraised at that time at the 1 acre, at $440,000. Now, at this time, however, McAndrew's wife, the $440,000, was convinced that she'd be better selling off her half at the $440,000. So she got, right then and there, at the $440,000 appraisal, $220,000. You had Mark Schneider tell you that. But Andrew, who was a common owner of the undivided property, said no. He wanted $1.2 million. Then McAndrew told me that he kind of fired his real estate agent at a time. And BC Transit claims that that meant the end of the land assembly because, when it was the end of the land assembly, their $440,000 appraisal under the townhouse potential zoning dropped back to the original of $220,000. McAndrew's wife had got her $220,000, and they then said to him, you can get half of what is now the proper appraisal because it's back on its own that acre. Here's a check for $112,000. McAndrew won't take it. He still wants his million. Now, he can now go to arbitration, and, you know, it's toss of the coin how much he'll get. He might get $112,000. He might get $100,000. He might get $75,000. Well, I think if the transit side of the story stands up, she got away with the not got away. She properly received the $220,000 at the time it was assessed at $440,000. The assessments dropped because of Transit's claim that the potential townhouse zoning is gone. He got the proper half of the original of $220,000 equals $110,000. Well, I've asked my intrepid transit line reporter, Mark Schneider, did I get it right? Oh, please, sir.
Yep. Well, it's as right as you can get it. It's a complicated, woolly story. It's never nice and black and white like you like it. There's shades of gray.
You got another call this morning from another real estate man.
Well, apparently the real estate agent that McAndrews fired is now back on board, says the deal is all hunky-dory.
And there's another real estate guy who said, yes, we have a proper land assembly with the proper potential for some kind of development, and therefore the $220,000 is an unfair assessment of the total property.
And both of these real estate agents feel that BC Transit has made a mistake, that when it does go to arbitration, Mr. McAndrews will probably get what his wife got. But remember, he's still holding out for more. He still thinks his property is worth $1.2 million.
Because of the potential
That's
development.
Right.
Because what does this go, if the ALRT comes along and says, we're going to put a station here, does that in itself increase the value of property then and there?
No, as a matter of fact, by law, that's prevented for any improvement as a direct result of the ALRT rezoning, development along the way. For that increasing property values, it's absolutely forbidden that that increases the value that's given to expropriated property owners.
Well, it's still a good story that the wife gets $220,000 for her half, and he gets offered $112,000 for his half.
Doesn't seem fair.
How many sides are there to a story, Mr. Schneider?
At least one.
10. Depends on the nuances, the influences, and the attitudes. Now we're going to have a little bit of fun this morning. Number of TAFQs. You may have forgotten what TAFQs are. Oh, and I've got a phone call coming from the Ministry of Education about that Crane Library bit where I pointed out the obvious lack of priorities when you can call for bids for $65 million for bridge and you can't produce $50,000 for blind students so that they can continue their educations and get their degrees. Hope to have that one Oh, you think he's there, is he? Right after the break. Thank you. On the telephone, I've got Dick Melville of the Department of Education of Victoria. Dick, you heard me rant and rave a little bit about the $50,000 that the Crane Library hasn't got to develop the talking books, right?
That's right.
What can you, and you phoned me and said, hey, the department's taking a clobbering unfairly on this. Well, I wasn't clobbering the department. I was pointing out the anomalies of vast millions for this and we can't raise 50,000 for that. What is the score?
Okay, the department has had a fair amount of abuse this year, and some of it's been justified, some not. This is one not justified, and I want to correct that.
Please do. I'm happy to have you on the air.
Okay, May the 17th of last year, a letter addressed to Deputy Minister Jim Carter from President Doug Kinney of UBC, and very quickly he said, I regret to inform you that the Crane Library will no longer be able to produce recorded books for the blind at schools, colleges, and universities other than UBC. The letter goes on to point out the two positions that had been funded by a private benefactor and from operating revenue were being terminated because the grant had run out and that revenues are not reliable enough to sustain the positions. And the effect of that termination would be a decrease of up to 2/3 in the Crane Library's transcription capacity.
Right.
He points out that to restore the Crane Library's ability to support the services for us in the colleges would require support of the two positions or the hiring of those two people at a cost of $39,000.
Right.
The Deputy Minister, Jim Carter, replied on May the 27th that he sincerely regretted the announcement and would alert the special education branch of our ministry to go elsewhere for their needs, which we have done through the CNIB in Toronto and a number of other outlets in order to provide, and we are providing the same service that was provided before. It's just that we are going now to a number of suppliers.
Just a minute. Let me understand that. And I appreciate the situation and I'm glad to have the information. Does that mean that you are now going to restore the $39,000 so that the Crane Library continue its services to institutions other than its own people? Have you got the money yet?
Well, we of course are spending from a preset budget the same amount for that service to the students in our college system.
Had you given them a grant for it?
No.
In other words, they got private funding from a couple of benefactors.
That's right.
And the rest of the two salaries were in the budget.
They were in operating revenue, and the money, as Mr. Kinney points out, came from a private benefactor.
So when they didn't have the private benefactor, they cut out of as part of their economy, the provision they'd made for the people who did the work for the outside institutions.
That would appear to be the case.
Now, so you're now seeking for donors interested in educating the blind, seeking money from donors in education for the blind. Is that right?
We have gone to a number of other suppliers to supply those same tapes and supply the same service that we were providing to college students.
And are you going to pay for it?
Yes, well, of course.
Does that mean, Dick, and I'm not trying to put you in a corner, that the full service of the Crane Library will be restored?
No. I've got to clear this up.
Yeah.
About 2 years ago, we had a $5,000 fee-for-service contract for X number of tapes per year with Crane Library. We recognized that Crane Library had its own priority to service UBC students and could not handle our demands. They made that clear, so at that time, and that was 2 years ago, mind you, the $5,000 fee-for-service contract expired and was not renewed.
I see.
So after that, we have now We are now using the provincial library services in Burnaby for readers of original tapes and CNIB, as I mentioned, a number of sources in order to provide the same service. It was made very clear to us by Mr. Kinney that the service could not be provided by Crane.
Oh, I understand that. In other words,
we are not about to fund two positions.
You're saying that the UBC is prepared only to fund its, or to arrange for the books only for its own people.
That was certainly the very distinct impression. And
clear enough. You are now trying to find other organizations which will do the work not being done by the cut-down Crane Library.
Well, since Mr. Kinney's letter of May, we have found those services, and we are still supplying the service.
What you're telling me, therefore, is that despite the story in the Vancouver Sun, the service is still intact.
Absolutely, in every way. There is nothing missing from that service that wasn't there 18 months ago.
And you haven't had to put up any money.
That's right.
Well, I'll take your word for it, Dickie boy.
Well, the service is there. The college students are being serviced throughout the province. That service has not lapsed in any way. I'm assured of that by my people in special education.
Okay, so it's UBC looking after its own people. You have made sure that other people are looking after the others. The system might not be as flexible, but it's good, you say.
That's right. It's working well.
Dick, I take it back. But you should have had that story out before now. You've been slow off the mark.
Well, the attempt was made yesterday. However, you know what happens. Once a story's out, sometimes the rebuttal doesn't make it.
Just as well, I flipped my little lid this morning. Now we know the story. I'm now assured, Ministry of Education announced today on the Webster program that although there is an apparent shortage of Crane libraries for the blind in UBC, which previously supplied other institutions, arrangements have been made through other provincial government libraries, etc., to give exactly the same quality and quantity of tapes for blind students needing them in the province of BC, and there is no gap. Okay?
Thank you very much, Jack.
Thanks, Dickie boy. If anybody has any trouble about them, please give me a call. Well, you got to give the guy a say. Are you making funny signs? Fred's going like this. You know what that means? Break. One day I'm going to his neck after the break. I like to follow up stories that happen on the air. And Paul Watson, you know, the freebooter, the guy who got jailed for the ceiling caper, said on the program a very interesting thing. When he went to jail in Quebec and in court, he couldn't understand them because they were all in French. Here's what he said on the program that day. Is it easy to do good behavior in a jail?
Well, it is if you're English in a French jail and nobody understands you anyway. You're sort of a phantom. You just sort of drift around. And you're not
You
even
mean
in the
you
hierarchy.
don't get served in your own, one of the official languages of the country?
Well, I couldn't find a single prison guard that spoke English, but...
He couldn't find a single prison guard that spoke English. And as a result of that, I received the following fascinating letter from Dan McKenzie, Tory MP. About that unilingual French jail guard in a Quebec institution, says Dan. A public service competition in the Montreal Gazette, and I've got the ad, calls for unilingual French applications for employment in Quebec, but bilingual candidates for other provinces. This, says Dan, is blatant discrimination against unilingual English Canadians. And if somebody will find that ad for me, I think my memory tells me that it was a public service ad for corrections service. You can be unilingual in Quebec to get a job in the jails, but you got to be bilingual in the rest of the country. Now, I know that 75% of the people of Quebec speak one language only, but that's ridiculous. I mean, that's blatant discrimination. I say that without fear of contradiction. Fascinating letter, which I should not put on the air, from Bev Penhall of ICBC. We are asking media people to put together a maximum of 5 questions for ICBC. Media people. They will help us to give fast response to inquiries from media and the public. We hope the ultimate list of questions will cover all aspects of ICBC operations, practices, and history. Please pass along the questions that most frequently come your way from the public May we hear from you soon, CB Penhall, Manager Public Information, Itchy Bitchy. Now, I am going to enlist you as media assistants, and I want you to write to me clearly so that I can read them, preferably typed. Your question to ICBC. I mean, we get dozens of questions, but who remembers them? It's so complicated. Send your media questions to Webster, Post Office Box 4700, Vancouver, etc. Oh, she's got, oh, very clever, Pat. Vancouver, BC, V6B 4A3. They must be no more than 2 sentences. They must be clear. And let's drown Penhall. Let's swamp them in a mass of media questions from the people who've been messed around or otherwise or complimented by ICBC. Now we come to a question. I've got to whip Steve and Mark into doing these things. They don't like to do them, but I like them. It's called TAFQs. That's a fair question. Bilingual. Hello, Jack. Who put hell in a letter here? That should have been taken out. Why the dickens does the Department of Defense send HMCS Ottawa to Florida to get painted? We have perfectly good shipyards on each coast, it shouldn't be both coasts, capable of painting a rust bucket like the Ottawa, and plenty of unemployed ship workers who jump at the work. David Sims, Victoria. The answer. There is a simple answer, according to the Public Affairs for National Defense. The weather is to blame. Ships can't be painted during Canadian winters, so ship painting is combined with regular training exercises in warmer climes, such as the Caribbean. The work is done by the ship's sailors. Why can't the work be scheduled for our summer? The National Defense say when a ship needs painting, it's got to be painted, and it happens to need painting now. Let me tell you, the Canadian Navy is the best painted fleet in the world that cannot go to sea, except to Florida or maybe Bermuda. Hawaii is too dangerous for our ships, too long away, and that's why we paint the ships in foreign waters. TAFQ. Next one. We're in the process of appealing a decision of the tax department that says we owe them more money, but they want us to pay them first even before our appeal is heard. The only way we can come up with the money is to remortgage our home, and that is totally unfair. What do you think? Revenue Canada has already told you it is prepared to consider your situation as a hardship case. The department requires a letter from your credit union guaranteeing payment in case the appeal goes against you. So far, as you well know, the credit union has refused to supply the letter of credit. Well, that shouldn't be too difficult. Get another bank to do it for you. Another one. Dear Jack, one of Vancouver's switchiest hotels, I won't mention its name out of charity and concern for the BC tourism industry, had the nerve to ask me for an extra night's payment in cash in advance. All because I didn't have a credit card. I offered to pay for 2 nights in advance, but when they demanded a 3rd night's worth as a security deposit, I hit the roof and booked in at their competition across the street. What now, eh? Why don't you grow up and get a credit card? It makes life a lot simpler. I did check with one hotel in question, the hotel, and the manager confirmed it is his hotel's policy to ask for an extra night's payment as a security deposit to protect themselves from guests who welsh out on room service, etc. I remember and covered the story when a shabby little guy in a checked shirt wandered in unshaven and with a drink on his breath to the Hotel Vancouver and was promptly chucked out. If it hadn't been for the intervention of Art Cameron, the man in question was Bing Crosby. And that's another reason the hotels will sometimes say, where's your credit card? If you go in dressed like a bum to a fancy hotel, weaving or staggering a little bit, and I'm not suggesting it happened here, they want your credit card to make sure you ain't, what is it they call them? They have a special name for them in the hotel business. You're going to have to hold on, will you? Hold on. Mark, take the call on line 2 now, please. Speak to Mark Snyder, would you please? Otherwise, I've got to put you on the air. And you don't want to go on the air, so hold on. Don't go away. 2. You'll have to, take a number. Just a minute. Give me your number off the air. What's your number off the air? No. Let me explain to you. I have a line that's usable on the air. I can phone you back privately in 2 minutes if you give me a number. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Bye. What am I? What am I doing? Free for all. Phone that number, please, and give me a little message from it. Where am I going? I can't see a phone number. No, I'm doing a free-for-all, but I forgot to tell you I was doing a free-for-all. Friday morning, after all, it's been a long and arduous week. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Hello?
The one significant thing that comes out of your program this morning, which I thought was extremely interesting, is that no one is allowed to criticize the Israelis or Jewish people for anything that they do, which was significant this morning. You can go to jail in Canada, you can be charged for it, and yet you can irrationally criticize an identifiable group, the Social Credit Cabinet, and no one ever charges you or accuses you of hating an identifiable group.
I deal with Zionist spokesmen in exactly the same way as I deal with PLO spokesman in exactly the same way as I deal with any other story, in that I attempt to get a lucid, simple explanation of what their problem is.
Well, I didn't mean that you particularly would not say anything normal about the Israelis. I'm just saying that the whole world isn't allowed to, because they're so diligent at protecting themselves, and yet you can criticize an identifiable group. I don't believe in this law. I believe that people should criticize when they see something wrong. But I just say that there's a great double standard here, which is contributing to the conflict between the PLO and the Israelis. Which is, I'm not going to say that I think one side or another is right, but you certainly aren't. There's a double standard anyway.
Thank you, ma'am. In a small measure, I agree with you. From Victoria, go ahead, please.
Yes, our gracious Canadian Navy made it all the way to Panama, according to an article in the Times.
And none of them sank? None of them sank. He's hung up. Did he hang up? Maybe he's a sailor and the ship sank. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. I become very perturbed when I hear a pseudo-intellectual calling you a redneck when you express your viewpoints in regards to foreign students getting a free ride in this province. We have between 4,500 to 5,000 foreign students going to our universities and colleges in this province, costing the BC taxpayer somewhere between $45 to $50 million.
Well, your figure's wrong. George Peterson, to whom you're referring, who called me a redneck, did that with tongue in cheek. So don't worry about that. But I agree with you that we are being ripped off by wealthy students on visas. But what annoys me even more, and I've only done one story on this since I've been on television, is where people who want to make a buck can buy an old house, set it up as a residence, form a tiny little school up the road from it, and then go to Asia or India or anywhere else, mostly Asia, and advertise for students, help them to get visas, bring them out here, milk them, by the way, at high cost for their accommodation, and they're in here as visa students, and they come off the boat or the plane and they cannot speak a word of English in attempting to qualify for grade 12, to qualify for entrance to our universities at the same rates as Canadians.
Correct.
And I object to it very strongly. Indeed, I don't rant and rave about it too much, because there's always people say, you're a racist, which is not true.
No.
I believe that we should charge 4, 5, or 6 times to those wealthy students who come in here I remember I did a piece on immigration about the parents of convenience.
Yes.
Remember?
Yes.
Come over here, buy a big house, sometimes get status, sometimes not. Send the kids over, that's another one. And the kids qualify for universities, and after their 5 years, they stay here.
That's right. In fact, I'm not 4 or 5 times. I want to have them pay 100% of the cost. I'm not saying that somebody on a scholarship...
Oh, you're talking about capitalization too. Anyway, your point is well taken. Enough of that. Get into deep water. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. Just a quickie.
Yeah.
One advantage of being unemployed, of course, is one gets to watch Webster.
It's
However,
not worth
this
any
week
money.
you've had 2 excellent speakers, Dr. Patterson one and the lady from Toronto the other morning.
Barbara, baby.
And my feeling was that you didn't allow these people enough time. They were really very, very good, I thought.
Matter of fact, I was telling off Wyatt and Schneider the other day, too many guests. We gotta cut. But the trouble is that guests are a toss of the coin.
Yeah.
I knew that Emile would be terrific. She always is.
She's just fantastic. But back
But
on the
sometimes you
UBC
book it-
issue, I worked there for 2.5 years a little while back.
What, where?
In the physical plant department in the administration there. And it was probably one of the most interesting jobs I've ever had, but at the same time, by far and away the most frustrating work-wise.
Goodbye. I'm glad you liked Barbara. What was the other one you liked? Peterson.
Pedersen, I thought he was a very good man.
I think Peterson's going to be first class once he learns the ropes in the job. Because after all, he's never really been out in the real world.
Yeah, but the trouble is
He's only an
UBCs are different from other universities.
Yeah,
It's
but,
a
you
political pawn.
Academicians, you know, these intellectuals.
Right, thanks, Jack.
They eventually learn how to, you know, handle practical matters, but it takes them some time. What's the time? I'll take a break. One little item on the transit deal I should have emphasized was that Mrs. McAndrew was satisfied with the way she was handled both by a real estate agent on BC Hydro and is not involved in the present doing. That's why there's always 10 sides to every story, and you never get it. And these things, you never get them right the first time round. Now, where am I going? Oh, yes. During Christmas, I've been taking out my watch for a reason. Before Christmas, I had a big old-fashioned bar on my lapel when I wore my gold watch. Some kind listener sent me this beautiful little chain in, which clips on and off, and is much better than ruining the buttonhole. I lost her letter. I think she's from White Rock. Thank you very much indeed for the wee chain. It's now one of my prized possessions with one of my prized possessions. Hudson Hope? Haven't been there for years. Hello there, Hudson Hope.
Hello, Jack. How are you?
Not bad. Still got big gravelled streets?
Pardon?
We still got all these gravelled roads in
Oh,
Hudson?
no. She's all paved, thriving metropolis up here now.
How many people?
Pardon?
How many people live in Hudson Hope?
Oh, I couldn't really tell you for sure. I'm fairly new to the community myself.
All right, what's on your mind?
Well, I was just watching your show this morning, and I guess it's taped because I'm still looking at you and I'm not talking to you. But I took exception to something that you said about credit cards.
Just a minute. It's not taped. It's live with a 7-second delay. That's why they got to turn down the
Oh,
sound.
I see. You're breaking up so bad, BC Tel. But actually, the exception that I took, Jack, was to a statement you made about somebody growing up and getting credit cards. And, you know, we got enough trouble in this society the way it is right now where I can't even cash a check half the time because I haven't got a damn credit card. And I won't have one of those with those leeches charging their 24 and 25% on your money.
Well, I must say it's very handy. You can take a credit card with you, and then you can pay them by check. Right?
Well, this is true, but then there's a few people in the society. Look at the number of people we've got right now that are deep in trouble over credit cards because the schools don't teach you how to handle them.
Well, no. Well, that happens anyway. Many people are stupid. You've got to never forget that. Not everybody is brilliant. But tell me, do they accept credit cards? This is a nasty remark. In Hudson Hope?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I accept your point. Now get back to work.
Yeah, right. I wish we would.
What, are you unemployed?
No, I'm not on strike. I'm being held out by that ignoramus you had on the show back a few days ago.
Which one is, oh, OTEU?
Yeah, Trotter.
I mean, you're a good IBEW member and you're objecting to this picket line by OTEU.
Well, let's just put it this way. I think that he's got a lot of things to learn.
Matter of fact, I think they've kind of lost that strike.
Yeah.
And if the IBEW put on the pressure they're capable, they'd be back to work tomorrow. But you know how difficult it is to get the IBEW to do anything, don't you?
No comment.
See, gutless. That's your problem. Oh, yes. Remember the other day I ran the contest, the 4 words ending in DOUS? Horrendous, tremendous, stupendous, and hazardous. And a girl sent in, 7 or 8 words. So I sent her an extra T-shirt. Where are you, Pat? I need the letter. I need the letter. Pat. This is from Leanne Salt in North Vancouver. Wearing her Webster T-shirt. Doesn't she look just gorgeous? Webster T-shirt, of course, would make almost anyone, including me, look gorgeous. Well, that was good fun this morning. Yeah, too many guests in this program. More Webster and fewer guests. That's what we need, especially on Fridays. If you want to take it away, take it away. This is a makeup person, Pamela Mason, isn't it? Drives me crazy. Combs my hair all the time and makes me look most unnatural. There is how I want my hair in the future. Is that clear?
It's easier that way.
Is it easier that way? She won't let me appear in ruffled hair. I'll be back Monday, 9, Monday it is, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you very much. You do a beautiful job of my hair. 9 a.m. precisely.
To get up and you have to have breakfast with the man that abused you the night before. And everything is so damn normal. I went up to my father's room and he was laying there. He looked old, he looked sick, he was crying, and I felt totally responsible. What have I done to my dad? And I went in and I knelt beside him and I apologized for telling. The judge decided it would be in my best interest to send me back home. I was sent back to my mother and father, and within a week, 2 weeks, Dad started the abuse again. By then, I really didn't care anymore.
This very day has, by its own figures, about 20 million people in political prisons, and we are standing up in Parliament and giving this man a standing ovation. It's a shame on Canada.
Spokesman for the PLO on check at midnight.